This is the third part in a series on understanding Islam, unpacking the dhimma, and we're speaking here about the jizya head tax and its meaning and the way it has been applied. Jizya comes from a verb jaza, and it means something given as an acquittal or satisfaction or compensation for something else. It's a compensation payment. It's defined in the dictionaries written by Arabs but translated by the scholar Lane as the tax that's taken from the free non-Muslim, that is not a slave, of a Muslim government whereby they ratify their compact, so they ratify their surrender treaty, and that it assures them protection as though it were a compensation for their not being slain. That's the meaning of this tribute. You're paying to keep your head. It's levied on dhimmis as an annual head tax, and it's payable by each individual adult male dhimmi person. The reason why the adult males pay it is that they are the ones whose lives can be taken freely in jihad conquest. Women and children are not supposed to be killed. And in fact, where Islam is very specific and it says that certain people are exempt from being killed, they are also the ones who technically are exempt from paying the jizya head tax. There's a complete match between the people that should pay the head tax and the people that can be freely killed when they're taken captive. So if you're fighting the Taliban or someone like that and you're a man, in Islamic law and the rules of law, the Geneva Convention of Islam, you can be killed when you're taken as a captive if you're a male. The monies are allocated for the benefit of the Islamic community. This is not a tax to improve citizens' lot in the state or build bridges. It's to help Muslims and help the advance of Islam. The word jizya is a compensation, and Atfaish, who wrote a commentary which was really specialized in the meanings of words, and he focused on this. He said, jizya is a satisfaction for their blood. It has sufficed to compensate for their not being killed. Its purpose is to substitute for the duties, wajib, as a compulsory obligation of killing and of slavery. It's for the benefit of the Muslims. What he's saying is that the Muslim community has a duty, it's a compulsory duty, to fight and kill and enslave non-Muslims. But they can be relieved of that responsibility by receiving tribute from the non-Muslims instead. And so there's an exchange. Now the reason why they suffer loss is that if you kill your enemy, his wife and children become your slaves, and his property becomes your property. So you have made a significant loss by not doing that. You suffered by not killing them, and they have to compensate you for that loss. So that's why it's a compensation payment. Interestingly, Germany paid tribute after First World War, and I heard that recently they made their last payment. That's a compensation they had to pay for presumably being at fault in the war. To understand the jizya, this tribute payment, it's really interesting to look at the jizya payment ritual, the way in which the jizya was actually paid, and the men would pay it once a year. On the day of payment, this is from the 15th century in Morocco, a description by a Muslim jurist. On the day of payment, the dhimmis shall be assembled in a public place. They should be standing there waiting in the lowest and the dirtiest place. The acting officials representing the law, Islamic law, shall be placed above them and shall adopt a threatening attitude so that it seems to them as well as to the others that our object is to degrade them by pretending to take their possessions. So it's as if we were about to loot them, which is what you do in jihad. They will realize that we're doing them a favor in accepting from them the jizya and letting them go free. Then they shall be dragged one by one for the exacting of payment. When paying, the dhimmi will receive a blow. It's a blow on the neck, and will be thrown aside so that he will think that he has escaped the sword through this. This is the way that the friends of the Lord, that is of Muhammad and the first and the last generations, will act towards their infidel enemies, for might belongs to Allah, to his apostle, and to the believers. So that's from Morocco. The blow on the neck is a symbol of being decapitated. So it's a blow to show that you're buying your head back that year. And I've made a particular study of this ritual and gathered together descriptions of the ritual from many different commentaries. There's a great website put out by a foundation set up by the Jordanian royal family, and they have more than 50 commentaries on the Quran there, mostly in Arabic. And we went through every commentary on 929, Surah 929. I collected together information from that and from legal textbooks. And here are some of the descriptions of the ritual payment. The dhimmi comes to the place of payment walking and not riding, or some say he walks on his hands and knees. He makes the payment standing while the receiver is seated. Normally the receiver would be high up and seated above him. The dhimmi is shaken violently and made to become agitated, sort of roughed up. The Muslim might have a whip in his hand. The dhimmi is commanded to pay, even though everyone knows that's what he's there for, and he's beaten up perhaps. He could be dragged forward by the throat using clothes or a rope around his neck, which is what you do with prisoners. After you've taken them prisoner, you put ropes around their neck and you can drag them along by the ropes around their neck. So it's as if he's a prisoner, taken captive in war, about to be executed. He's struck on the back of the neck or on the side of the neck. These are two ways to decapitate people: a very hard blow with a sword here, or to cut from the throat backwards. He's pulled along by the beard. Another thing you do when you're decapitating someone, you might pull the beard. He might have dirt thrown on his head, and a Muslim might tread on the dhimmi's neck. So these are descriptions of the ritual from Islamic sources. And I've been able to trace descriptions of this ritual from sources, as you can see, from the 10th century right through to the 20th century, from Persia, Syria, Anatolia, that's like Turkey, from Andalusia, from Morocco, Egypt, Yemen, Bukhara in Central Asia, Baghdad, Algeria. And the ones I've underlined on the screen all come from Morocco. And it's very interesting, that description I read to you from Morocco was confirmed by James Riley, who was an American ship's captain who was shipwrecked off the African coast and was enslaved by the Moroccans. He was eventually ransomed, and he wrote an account of his adventures. And he describes the ritual of seeing Jews. There were only Jews left living as dhimmis in Morocco by that time. He describes them going through that ritual. That was 300 years later. And at the end of the 19th century, an Italian Jew was visiting Morocco, and he saw the Jewish community being put through this ritual. And he said, I need to go through that as well, because I'm a Jew too. And they did it and gave him 2 blows on the neck for his insolence. So it's described right up until the end of the 19th century, and it continued on in the 20th century in Morocco, Tunisia, Yemen, in the 50s in Afghanistan, still being recorded. I'll speak later about what's happening in more recent years. It stopped, by the way, because of Western powers invading Muslim countries or putting pressure on them. That's why it stopped. Imagine if, when William the Conqueror conquered England, that he required the Anglo-Saxons to line up on every village green and to pay a tax while they were ritually stabbed in the heart. And this is still going on today, since 1066, and it's going to go on for another 400 years, and it'll only stop when England is invaded by a foreign power. That's how long this ritual defeat was applied throughout the Muslim world, and that's the kind of time depth that we're looking at. This is it's a ritual of death, you need to understand too. It's a kill me if I break any of your laws ritual, a cross my heart and hope to die ritual. It's what we call a blood oath, where you go through a ritual death to signify that you are bound by that oath. And if you break any of its conditions, your head will be forfeit. It's a spiritually very powerful form of a ritual. Organizations like witchcraft and Chinese tongs and other brotherhoods and so on, they have these death rituals by which they bind their members into silence. And we find in Christian ministry that these sorts of rituals have a very strong psychological power. Ibn Ajibah, who's an 18th century Moroccan commentator, he commented on 929 on the psychological impact of this. He said, the dhimmi is commanded to put his soul, good fortune and desires to death. Above all, he should kill the love of life, leadership and honour. He is to invert the longings of his soul. He is to load his soul down more heavily than it can bear until it's completely submissive. Thereafter, nothing will be unbearable for him. He will become indifferent to subjugation or might. Poverty and wealth will be the same to him. Praise and insult will be the same. Preventing and yielding will be the same. Lost and found will be the same. And then when all things are the same, that is, when he's indifferent to all pain, humiliation and suffering, he will be submissive and yield willingly what he should give. So he's saying the purpose of this ritual is to completely break the spirit of non-Muslims, so that when we want them to give us money or give us their wives or give us whatever we want, they will just do it without any objection, and they'll have no ambition for themselves, no desire to rebel. Their spirits will be completely broken. Al-Alusi, who's a commentator from Syria, he said, but we know that enslaving them is permitted. Whoever may be enslaved can also be subjected to jizya, because both slavery and jizya involve plundering their soul. The case of slavery is clear because we all benefit from slaves. In the case of jizya, this is produced by the infidel from what he earns, and he lives on what he earns. So when he surrenders his earnings to Muslims, which is his reason for being allowed to live, this is ruled to be equivalent to taking away his soul. So this has a very profound psychological effect. The jizya payment ritual symbolizes the destruction, really, of someone's freedom, of their life and their will to live. That's the end of that section.